Hi, my name is Kasim. I've built 6 million and multi-million dollar businesses. I've had 2 successful exits, one for 8 figures. I've generated a $10,000,000 net worth, and my new goal in life is to help as many people as I possibly can achieve 3x freedom. That's financial freedom, freedom of dimension, which means time and location, and freedom of purpose. Today, I want to talk to you about why rock bottom is actually the best place to grow from. Now, if you are at rock bottom presently, I realize that might sound a little condescending and really frustrating because rock bottom is a horrible, horrible place to be. I know because I've been there actually multiple times. However, if you'll take heart for a moment, I can tell you that my experience has been rock bottom was the best thing that ever happened to me. Hitting rock bottom was the best growth opportunity, the best learning opportunity, and actually functionally the best place to grow from. And I've heard the exact same thing from a myriad of different sources and mentors and teachers and coaches along the way. Let me tell you a quick story. When I was 20 years old, I started building software for banks, and I just absolutely lucked out. Right place, right time. Got a really big client, and I was making way more money than a kid should make. And I did what everybody who has never had money does. I spent it. I didn't just spend my money. I spent all the money anybody would lend me. I bought this great big house on a hill, bought the, flashy car. I was always picking up the check when we'd go out to really lavish dinners and, fun events and bars and parties. And I was paying for, $200 haircuts and mostly out of insecurity, but I don't know that I realized that at the time. Short version of long stories, I was a douchebag. And I had no concept of the real value of money. And in retrospect, I look back with some level of forgiveness for myself because how could I have? This isn't something that we teach in schools. It's actually not readily available. Even if you seek out education on finances, I think most of the information that we're exposed to is flawed. And I was raised poor. My mom was blind. I was raised by a blind single mother on Social Security disability, which is effectively welfare. Like me and my little brother were welfare babies from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Money was always a pain point for me. And I thought, like, man, when I get money, that was my goal in life since I was 7 years old. I was like, I'm going to be rich. And I needed it more than I was willing to admit at the time. Like I needed financial stability because for me, money meant security. And so, 20 years old, flash forward, all of a sudden, I'm not rich per se, but I'm making way more money than a 20-year-old generally makes. And I thought I was rich and I acted like I was rich. And so I did what all poor people do. I pretended to be rich. And flash forward 2 years later, I got the fancy house on the hill and the fancy car, and I think I'm balling, and the financial collapse takes place. For me, it took place a year early. I was building software for the bank that brought down Lehman Brothers. It was one of the largest bank failures in U.S. history. And next thing I know, my whole economic world collapses, basically. Houses foreclosed on, cars repossessed. I'm in multi-six figures in debt. I ended up living in this apartment building that I could only afford it because they gave me 3 months free if I signed an 18-month lease. My credit was still, thank God, I moved to the apartment before the foreclosure and all those things went through. So I had to borrow $150. Like I did not have $150. I had to borrow $150 for the application fee. And then I'm in this apartment, which I ended up being evicted from, by the way. Like the story took much longer than the 3 months for me to start paying rent. And I have nothing. I have no job prospects. I don't know if you were, depending on how old you are, you might remember '08, but like nobody's hiring. I'm unemployable. I don't have a degree. I have no real skills. And I'm depressed. It's a horrible place to try to build from. I was just like, everything was just, I was like, God, how did I get back here? I started poor. I thought I'd like made a dent, made something. And I learned very, very quickly that money was not my money. Those assets weren't my assets. I was just so heavily leveraged, and I thought in terms of like what payments I could afford. My car payment was obscene, but I could afford it. So I bought the flashy car, and my mortgage was 3 times what I should have been paying, but I could afford it. So because I was thinking in terms of monthly payments, and I had the insecurities that required me to go out and get the big fancy things, I put myself in this ultra leveraged position. And then when the proverbial feces hit the fan, I was vaporized quickly. And so I'm sitting in a bathtub of gasoline lighting matches, emotionally speaking, and I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I was at absolute rock bottom. Nowhere to turn, nobody to help me. My mom's blind and living off of Social Security. My dad had a business that was, equally devastated, maybe more devastated than mine actually, because he had a multi-million-dollar SBA loan. He ended up leaving town and trying to start something somewhere else. Like, I was alone. And man, it was a blessing. It was such an unbelievable blessing. It taught me so many things. The most important thing it taught me was rock bottom is firm. Like, it's a strong foundation. Your feet actually land. And that's the first feeling I had, was just falling. I was falling and falling and falling. As my house foreclosed on, and I'm falling, and my car's repossessed, and I'm falling, and the creditors are calling me. I don't know if you've ever been called by creditors, but they're not kind people. And I'm getting served by process servers at various places, and they're like waiting for me outside my apartment, and I'm falling. And then all of a sudden I hit rock bottom, and there's actually this place where you're like, man, at least this is as bad as it can get. And I don't think that was actually true. I wasn't counting my blessings, but it did feel that way. It was like, at least I know, like, this is as far down as I'm going to go. I'd lost the house. I lost the car. I stopped trying to pretend. And so I was no longer trying to pretend to friends and family that I was somebody I wasn't. I gave up all pretense. And I was just, and that was really helpful. Like, hitting rock bottom. And, I no longer had the fancy watch, and I no longer had the fancy car, and I wasn't trying to pretend. And rock bottom helped me just be honest about where I was. And so people stopped asking me to go out and go to dinner because I wasn't picking up the check. And I kind of learned who my friends were and who they weren't. And the people that stuck around were people that knew what my situation was and what I was capable of and what I wasn't capable of. So helpful, so helpful. The other thing that's interesting about rock bottom is when you start to build back up, you don't realize how poorly structured most of what you've built in life is until you build from rock bottom. Because rock bottom is a very firm foundation. And generally speaking, we build 2 or 3 or 4 standard deviations above rock bottom because we have friends or resources or things available to us and accessible to us. Rock bottom is, no pun intended, is rock freaking solid. So, I'm sitting in this apartment. I have no money. I have no job prospects. I don't know what to do. So I start trolling Craigslist for gigs. Like, I'll fix somebody's broken the HTML on their website for $50. Like, just anything I could get randomly. And that ended up leading to web work. I started doing, I was building software, and I didn't know how to build software. I was outsourcing all of the work, which is another problem, right? Like, I didn't have any real skills, and that business was built, like I said, 4 standard deviations above rock bottom. So I was selling these projects and then offshoring them, which worked great when it worked. I do zero work, I make all this money. But when it stopped working, it vaporizes instantly. But I'm smart enough to kind of figure out some of the computer techie stuff. And so I start doing that. I start taking on just like whatever work I can find on Craigslist. If it happens on a computer, I'll do it. And it's not that I was great at it, but what was interesting was it allowed me to begin to build a business that was actually viable. And here's what's really interesting. The analogy that I'll offer you is this. Not too long ago, I bought a tree for my front yard, a jacaranda tree. My kid's mom loves these jacaranda trees. They only flower 2 weeks out of the year, but when they flower, they're stunningly beautiful. And so we got it for Mother's Day. Have the arborist come, dig the hole, plant the tree, put in their fish emulsion or whatever they do, and then they say, okay, if the tree dies, it's guaranteed for a year. We'll come back and replace it. And I thought that was a weird statement, but then the tree started to go south. And the gentleman that helped me around my home at the time, he was a horticulturist professionally before he retired, and like he knew plants and trees and all those things, and he was trying to help me nurse this tree back to life. And he goes, yeah, when you buy a full-grown tree, and I mean it wasn't full-grown, but when you buy a tree and you just have it planted, the odds of them surviving is actually pretty slim, because the soil might not be right, the positioning might not be right, the stability of the tree's off. It's really, really, really hard to get that right. So the right thing to do from the perspective of the horticulturalist is to grow your own tree, like from a sapling, from a seed. The reason people don't do that is because it takes forever. It's harder. It takes way more time, way more effort, way more attention. But when you do that, if the seed actually sprouts and the roots actually take to the soil and the thing's actually able to grow, and it grows in the direction and the strength of the base is, like everything that happens is organic. It happens organically in a way to where that tree's not going anywhere. That's the tree that's going to survive exactly where it is. And if you live anywhere where they do, hardcore planned landscaping, you see all the time, especially in storms. This happens in Phoenix, Arizona all the freaking time. Storm comes through during monsoon season, and then these trees and these cacti they're just, they riddle the streets because they were uprooted and planted there. They don't belong there. The same thing is true for businesses that are built not from the bottom, not from a firm foundation. And the reason for that is it's multifaceted. I think one of the first and most important reasons is they tend not to rely on first principles, meaning they've been juiced in some way. They've been artificially inseminated in some way. Very often, this is advertising. If you don't know my background, I built what I think was the largest Google Ads agency in the world. We were the #1 ranked Google Ads agency in the United States for years. I think we still are. I sold it 2 years ago. But what was interesting about that business was, when I sold, I had $100 million in ad spend under management. Hundreds of clients passed through Solutions 8, possibly thousands. And I got to see a ton of different businesses and business models. And there were so many businesses that weren't real. And what I mean by that is they were in this vending machine-like, kind of magic ATM, to where when they put money into the box, just enough money came out for them to have enough money to put back into the box. And then they threw themselves into this cycle, this flywheel. But the instant anything went wrong, one bad client, one return, one bad sell, and I mean one, by the way, especially for people in the high ticket space, one mistake, one hiccup, it was gone. It was gone. And I saw it all the time. I saw it with really big names. I saw it with people I knew that were famous. And that's actually a problem, because those people tend not to grow from rock bottom. They tend to, kind of just come in, install a business. They have a bunch of overhead. They pay for executives and staff that they don't necessarily need. They have all this infrastructure they don't necessarily need. But they have the name that artificially inseminates the client base. And it goes for longer than it should. That's one of the things that's actually devastating about these businesses is they don't fail quickly. They can last years. And then when something happens, like the '08 collapse, for example, they cannot weather those storms because the infrastructure is not built from the bottom. It's not built from a firm foundation. It's not built from a base. And so what you really end up seeing with those businesses is it's a phantom form of success. They're only successful for as long as the weather is perfect. And you don't want that out of anything. You don't want choose your analogy, right? Like, think about a home, think about a ship. We'll stick with the home for a moment. Your house, your domicile, on an anthropological scale, is meant for safety, right? Like, we've turned it into something else, but it was really to protect us from the elements. It was more or less its only job. People didn't spend that much time in their homes, especially early stage humanity. Like, it was just for sleeping and protecting us from the elements. Well, if you have a house that crumbles in a storm, it's worthless. It's absolutely worthless. So you have to build your home to withstand a storm. Businesses are the exact same way. A business that crumbles in a storm is absolutely worthless. And building from rock bottom puts you in a position to really have very firm foundations, deep roots. The other thing that it does is it forces you into a position of resourcefulness and creativity. Like, when I was, trolling Craigslist for work, I didn't have money for advertising. This is a weird departure. I didn't have a computer. Not a fully functional one. My father's ex-wife gave me a laptop that didn't have a battery. So I had to, anywhere I went, I had to be next to a plug so I could plug this laptop in. And I would tell people, because, I was ashamed. I would tell them that, Arizona gets so hot, I don't carry the batteries because, you might not know this, but batteries explode. Swear to God, I used to tell that story because I didn't have a battery for this laptop. I built my entire business on this batteryless laptop that was old, and it still had the fans. If you're as old as me, you remember the laptops that weren't solid state hard drives. It would overheat. But I got so unbelievably resourceful, and I really learned what was absolutely necessary in order to conduct business. I didn't have business cards. There just wasn't a luxury that was available to me. The $50 that I would have had to spend to go get business cards printed, I did not have. It also forced me into a position of just honesty. Like I really had to be honest with people. I really had to manage expectations. I didn't have margin for error that I could buy myself out of. But what resourcefulness and creativity do is they lead you to sustainable business practices. You start to figure out what works over and over and over again with very little input. And that's a fun leverage game to play. A small amount of input, a larger amount of output, and I can do this again and again and again and again and again. And that only ever happens when you're building from rock bottom. That doesn't happen when you have the faux business that you just come in and kind of installed. I know, because I've tried the other way too. As soon as I made money, I started trying to just what a great idea. Let's just build a business. And those always, I haven't made one work. I have not made one work. I've got a portfolio of 5 or 6 businesses as I'm recording this, and they all, the ones that stick are grown grassroots from the bottom. Even now, I'm a Millionaire. I don't start businesses with any more seed capital than 50 grand, and usually that 50 grand stays in the account. I just take 50 grand, or if I have partners and we each put in 25 or whatever it ends up being, and the seed capital stays in the account. You'll spend a couple of, whatever it is on the SaaS product that you need in order to get, like we buy G Suite for our employees, let's say, or, you buy one person who's actually doing some of the grunt work. But other than that, we're growing from the ground up because I want to know that we have sustainable business practices. I want to know that my client acquisition is not artificially juiced. Paid traffic is not a reliable ecosystem. It's the same thing as the storm I was talking about earlier, going back to my analogy with Solutions 8. When people are running traffic, when they're paying for traffic, that traffic isn't your traffic. That's somebody else's traffic. You can't rely on that. So, I have these hundreds of clients that all look like they're unbelievably successful until one big competitor steps into the space and starts competing for the traffic. And then they not just stop advertising, they go out of business. I'm telling you, I've seen this so many times. It's haunting. I remember there was one company, amazing company, B2B SaaS products. So they were a software as a service specifically for a certain type of business that provided a service to other businesses. So they were kind of an intermediary in the background. The reason that's relevant is it wasn't a massive niche or industry, right? So you wouldn't think there's a huge target on their back. And for a while, they were minting money. Their cost per lead was like $15 or something. And if you're in any sales role, what I just said is like, oh my God, like ratchet. The only thing that ever stopped us from advertising more was their sales team ran out of slots on their calendar. Swear to God. 2 of their competitors ended up getting private equity money at the same time. Their cost per click skyrockets to $150. So they go from a cost per lead of $15 to a cost per click of $150. And it was devastating. They couldn't sustain. They ended up being just rolled into one of their competitors. They sold. I think they did okay in the exit, but it wasn't what the founders wanted. The founders wanted to build a great big company. But they were relying on a traffic source that wasn't real. It wasn't stable. It wasn't, and I mean, to say it's not real is unfair. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't predictable. So you can use paid traffic as a supplement. You can use referral traffic as a supplement. You can use affiliate traffic as a supplement. You can use referrals as a supplement. They're not sustainable. You need to find sustainable. Organic traffic, generally speaking, is sustainable. Community traffic is sustainable. Membership traffic, even social traffic to a big degree. Anything where you're building authority over the course of a long-term period of time, one person at a time, that's sustainable. So building from rock bottom helps you build sustainable business practices. The other thing that you get when you build from rock bottom is financial discipline. Most business owners that I know are not financially disciplined. They haven't really even traversed that realm of expertise yet. Like they haven't, and you probably know this, if you're a business owner or entrepreneur, especially if you're early stage, already you're like, I don't know how to read my own balance sheet. I don't really know how to read a P&L. I'm still kind of there, by the way, and I've made 2 exits. Like I now know enough to be dangerous. I know what people mean by top line and bottom line, but I'm still not, it's just not my realm of genius or expertise. And yet when I built from rock bottom, even though I don't understand those terms or the nomenclature, the semantics or the jargon, I understood the logic because I had no other choice. And when I spent money, It was because it really made sense. Because that's the only time I could spend money. I'm building from absolutely nothing. I'm not making rent. I ended up being evicted from 2 apartments, by the way. So the apartment I told you about where I got 3 months free, what was it? It was 3 months free, and then about 3 more months of me not paying rent and stringing them along. I think within there I was able to maybe make 1 month rent payment, got another month out of them, and then they were like, "Hey, you need to take a hike." And then my next apartment, because at this point my credit is tanked, is in my baby brother's name, and we were evicted out of that one too. So like I was I'm at zero. I'm at zero. Barely eating. I'm trolling Costco. I had my dad's expired Costco card, and I used to go to Costco, especially the one in Scottsdale. Oh my goodness, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, the Costco's the free tryouts are amazing. That was lunch for me. And I would make 2 rounds. It got to the where I knew the people, and everybody was very kind. And maybe if I could muster up $1.50, I'd get myself a hot dog and a soda. But even that was a luxury. I have no money is the point that I'm trying to make during this time. So when I would spend or invest in anything, it was out of absolute necessity. And what that did, though, is it helped me build a business that was viable long term. I had no bloat. I didn't have bloat from a resource perspective, from a software perspective, from a COGS perspective. My vendors and freelancers were very, very lean. That was the other thing that was really cool about it is, as I'm building this little business, and I hated the business, by the way. I hated doing web work. It wasn't fun, but it worked. It actually got the job done. And I was able to build my business in a way that I didn't have cost of goods until I sold a client, which, my software business wasn't exactly like that. Like I was paying for this software house just to be there in case I sold somebody, because I thought that's how things needed to be done, because that's how they sold me. And for a while there, I was actually really good at filling up their slate. Well, when I didn't have money, I couldn't have even been sold on that if I wanted to. So it actually protected me from making a really, really stupid decision. And all my cost of goods were tied to income, which is a great place to be. If I sell something for $100 and my COGS 20, all right. And I had to sequence it so that I didn't pay until I'd been paid. And I didn't, and I break up the milestones according to whatever milestones I negotiate with the client. If it's half now, half later, hey, the vendor, if they're not willing to take that, that's okay. I can't use you. I literally cannot afford to modify this in any other way, which ended up leading to really strong financial practices, really profound financial discipline. By necessity, I wasn't, you heard my story. I was not a financially disciplined person, but every dollar started meaning so much. And I think that's the next thing that I want to talk about is the fact that I was able to develop a very, very profound respect for and understanding of money. Not of, like I said earlier, I'm still not a financial guru, but I get money. I get it. It's fuel. I have a whole video on money, by the way, the money mindset. You need to go watch that video if you haven't watched it yet. I think it's one of the most important things I've ever produced from a content perspective. Money is fuel. So I think back at, the watches that I bought or the car that I was driving or the house that I was in, and I feel so stupid because all I was doing was burning fuel needlessly. When you're early stage as an entrepreneur, and I don't mean a young person, you could be 60 years old and you just started your business. When you're early stage as an entrepreneur, money is the lifeblood of your business. It's, one of the best analogies I've heard actually is that money is oxygen. Money is oxygen. And if you think about oxygen, oxygen's not really that important to you. When was the last time you thought about oxygen? Right? Like you just go about your day breathing until you don't have it. You know what I mean? And then it becomes really important really quickly. So money is not the most important thing in life. I'm not saying it is. But like oxygen, you have to have it. You have to have it. And for me to just go burning through money the way that I was, it was shameful. And yet I'm so grateful that I learned that lesson at 20. I timed that right. I'll tell you what. Whatever Providence was doing there, I really appreciate, because had I waited till I was 30 or 40, and I know people that learn that lesson later too, it's just takes longer to rebuild sometimes, and you already have, maybe you're married and you have kids, and I thank God I didn't have that infrastructure, but I was able to develop a profound respect for money, which only came from being at absolute rock bottom. Change. I still pick up change from the floor. If I'm, I do it with my kids. I kind of make it a game. If we're walking down the street, we go for a walk in the morning before school sometimes. And, if I see a penny or a dime or a nickel or whatever, I'll stop and I'll pick it up and I'll show it to them. And maybe we'll look at the year and then I put it in my pocket. Because I figure, like, if I want money, if I'm telling the universe or God or providence or whatever word resonates with you most, if I'm telling myself and the powers that be that I want money, how dare I pass it up in any denomination? There's something about that that actually feels really wrong. And if that feels dramatic to you, that's okay. You've probably never been at rock bottom. You've probably never been to the point to where you're like scrounging for change under your car seat trying to buy the $1.50 hot dog at Costco, which, by the way, I have no idea how they do. It's been that way for 20 years, adjusted for inflation. It's insane. Going back to the lessons that I've learned, the next thing I want to say, or the next thing I'd like to talk about, is building from rock bottom humbles you enough to do the work that's actually profitable. I loved building software. It was fancy. I got to go to conference rooms and talk about design and schemes and sprints and, deal with big numbers, 6-figure deposits. Building websites was not fancy. That was grunt work. And yet, I was able to make money. Building from rock bottom means that you're actually able to look at businesses through the lens of logic, not ego. And you look at a lot of things through that lens now. Rock bottom forces that. It's, man, we are at zero. We don't have the luxury of, is this fun? Is this cool? Do I enjoy this? Who cares? Who cares? Whoever told children to follow their bliss should be shot. Like, what horrible advice to give kids. Young people entering the workforce, and it's like, oh, go do what you love. No, nobody's going to pay you to do what you love. And you'll find that out when you go hit rock bottom. It's like, I loved to act. I've been in 80 films. That was my sad, pathetic passion when I was a kiddo. I wanted to make movies. Nobody wanted to pay me to make movies. I wouldn't be here if they did. I did the work that I could get paid for. And that was an important lesson to learn. And I'm still, by the way, on that kick. Right now, me and some buddies are trying to buy some septic companies. Because I know a septic, I'm literally moving shit. I am moving fecal matter in mass. And you know what it smells like? It smells like money. It's an old septic joke. Do what makes money. Do what works. Do what's functional. Do what's sustainable. But it's hard to do that unless you're at absolute rock bottom. So, another lesson from rock bottom. Another lesson that I learned was client acquisition, customers. When you're at rock bottom, you love customers. You really start to appreciate people. You really do. You start to appreciate people more than you ever knew you should have. Both clients and vendors, people that stick to their word and, don't jump down your throat if you make a mistake or gracious with timelines. Like, you really start to appreciate people. And when you appreciate people, they appreciate you back. You build a loyal customer base and you build a loyal vendor base that, hopefully becomes an employee base. I think the way that I look at and treat people really stems from being at absolute rock bottom. I was worthless, technically speaking. I don't mean that philosophically or, theologically or whatever. But I had nothing to offer anybody. I was at zero. And so many people cared for me or helped me or, people I didn't know. You just run into folks and they take a couple extra minutes with you to explain something or, I remember trying to make cold calls and 99 times out of 100, you get yelled at or cursed out or just hung up on more often than not. But one time out of 100, somebody would sit there on the phone with you and, just be kind. Even if they weren't interested in what you were selling. I remember I tried to break into dentistry. I thought like, oh, dentist, that's a good target. And I started just cold calling dentists. And I caught a gentleman who owned a couple of dental offices. He was a big deal. And he wasn't nice per se. Like, if you did sentiment analysis via AI, the AI would be like, oh, this man's, he was upset or whatever. But the kindness he showed me was immense because he really schooled me up. He kept calling me kid. He's like, kid, let me tell you, dentists are prey animals. He's like, I get called by furniture salesmen, medical device salesmen, financial planners, marketers. He's like, you are barking up the wrong tree. Really helped. It was really helpful. And then as I earned customers, man, I loved on them. They were my lifeline. They were so important to me. I don't know that I would have felt that way had I not been at rock bottom. That which is hard earned is equally valued. So uh, grow from rock bottom. And then I think the last thing I'll say, which I've already touched upon, but the lesson that I think that, maybe rounds all of these things out, is rock bottom leads to sustainable growth. Because when you're at absolute rock bottom, the thing that you build really is organic. Like, it's just, you have zero inputs outside of maybe time, effort, and energy. And so all of the input output mechanism there is very, very organic. And then you start to build from rock bottom, and every subsequent layer is on such a firm foundation. And it leads to equally firm foundations. The business that I owned was called KPO Global. KPO Global became Solutions 8. Solutions 8 started as a full funnel marketing agency and led to a Google Ads agency. Like, I can see this string of events, and each step, each layer, each story, each chapter led to a chapter that was informed by the one prior. So the way that I hired, the way that I paid, the way that I incentivized, the way that I marketed, the way that I ran, the way that I sold, like I sold for an 8-figure sum. And my business mentor, who was also my M&A advisor, he said, if you're not happy with the cash at close, don't take this deal. And that was the type of mentality that I learned at having been rock bottom, because I know money's vapor on paper. Like, I have been an Excel millionaire so many times before I ever actually had any money. But it's so easy to look at, fantasy numbers, fictional valuations, stock. The number of defunct stock certificates in my filing cabinet is unbelievable. It's really sad. But my understanding of money helped me close a deal that was, we picked the right buyer with a buyer's mandate that actually had real money, and we sold for, mine was a majority cash deal. Most agencies don't get that. They end up just being rolled into somebody else's organization, and now they have equity that may be worth something someday if that business gets bought or goes public, which generally does not necessarily happen. So, going back to the original thesis, if you are at rock bottom, first of all, I know it's hard, and it's really easy for some, now rich guy to say, like, don't worry, this is the best place for you to be. I'm not trying to diminish what you're going through. That's real. Like, the loss is real. The fear is real. Not knowing where your next meal is going to come from is such an unsettling feeling. Unsettling obviously doesn't do it justice, but there's just something about it it's almost invalidating. It, like, invalidates your existence. It's like, man, I'm not worth a hamburger, So, like, what you're feeling is real, and it needs to be honored. It can't be ignored. I try to do that too, just bury my head in the sand. And it's a gift. There's a gift here embedded for you. There's a learning lesson that I'm so grateful for what happened to me, and when it happened, and how it happened. And my hope for you is that on the other end of this, on the other end of rock bottom, you look back and you're like, man, thank God. I really needed that, because it burns off all that is unnecessary. It burns off unnecessary expenses, unnecessary things, unnecessary people. And I don't mean that a human being can be unnecessary, but a person can be unnecessary to you. Like, when I lost my money, I lost so many friends. It was shocking. And it was a relief at the same time. And then when I rebuilt, I had a different frame and a different approach and a different expectation and a different standard for myself. So if you're at rock bottom, it's okay to feel the way you feel. I'm not trying to invalidate that at all. That's real. The other thing that's also real is the opportunity that you have right now. It's unparalleled, especially from an entrepreneurial perspective. This is the best place for an early stage entrepreneur to be. And chances are you will be here a couple of times, because you're making big bets. Entrepreneurship is a big bet game. It's a big bet game, and you go all in sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't pan out. And what's nice is the second time you hit rock bottom, you're like, okay, I've been here before. I know what to do. Like, it sucks and I'm sad and whatever, but you just roll up your sleeves and you do the work. That's what I love about rock bottom. You really do the work. You learn to do the work. You learn the value of it. You learn to cherish it. I worked 80 hours a week for almost 20 years. You know, I'm an overnight success it was 20 years in the making. And I loved so much of it. I don't know that I realized that at the time, but it's because I spent enough time not having work available and accessible to me when I was at rock bottom, so that when it finally started to flow, I was like, oh, thank God. It was a relief. It wasn't a strain or a tax. And rock bottom taught me that. Rock bottom will teach you so many things. So if you're at rock bottom, I want to say I'm praying for you. And that might be the right thing to say. I'm praying for you. Like, for anybody listening or watching, I know it's hard, and I hope that you get through it with the minimal amount of necessary damage. But damage is necessary. And, you know, the dead wood's going to burn off, and what's left, that's what's valuable. That's irreplaceable. That's you. So that got a little preachy, but I'm going to leave it in. We're going to see how well I do just being me and how people respond to that. I shot a video on the money mindset. I think it's, like I said earlier, one of the most important videos I ever shot. So if this video resonated with you and you haven't watched that video yet, I'd go watch that one, because I think changing the way that you think about money is probably one of the most important things for you to do right now. I'm also trying to be YouTube famous. So if I've helped you at all, my ask of you is to share. Share this video. I don't care if you have 2 followers. Share this video and tell people why you're sharing it. Let them know, like, oh, you know, what Kasim said here is great, or what he said here is really stupid. I disagree. Good, bad, or indifferent. I'd love a share. You know, I'd love to talk to you in the comments. I respond to all my own comments. But like, comment, subscribe. That's between you and me. If you want to help me, share the video, and I'll keep making these. I'm trying to shoot a video every single day, so we'll see how well I do. Thank you for watching. I value your attention immensely. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.